Today we are going to start a new chapter, that is the molecular basis of inheritance. Previously we discussed about the principle of inheritance. These two chapters, they form the genetics, the basis of genetics. In the previous chapter, we saw the pattern of inheritance and the basis of inheritance. We also saw that the Mendelian factor or the genes which are linearly arranged on specific positions on the chromosomes, and these specific positions are known as loci. We all know that there are two types of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA is ribonucleic acid. Now these two types of nucleic acid are found in all living organisms. DNA acts as a genetic material, is found as a genetic material in all the living, almost all the living organisms except some prokaryotes. And RNA acts as a messenger, adapter molecule, and it helps in synthesizing of protein. It was Friedrich in the year 1868 who first discovered DNA from the pus cell, from the nucleus of the pus cell, and he called it as nuclein. He called it as nuclein. Altman in the year 1889 called it as nucleic acid. He called the nuclein, which was discovered by Friedrich Meisner, as nucleic acid, and he said that there are two types of nucleic acid, the DNA and RNA. It was Oscar Hertwig in the year 1884. He said that the nuclein acts as a hereditary substance, and it is responsible for the transmission of the hereditary characters. Now the question is, where is DNA found? Where it is located in the cell? In the prokaryotic cell, DNA is found in the cytoplasm, and it is not found in the nucleus, because prokaryotic organisms, they don't have any nucleus. Membrane bound nucleus is not present. But in eukaryotic cells, DNA is found in the nucleus, and it is known as nuclear DNA. And in some cell organelles, it is found, like in mitochondria and plastids, DNA is found in these organelles, and they are known as extranuclear DNA. So in eukaryotic cells, DNA is found in the nucleus, and hence it is known as nuclear DNA. In prokaryotic cells, it is not associated with the nucleus. It is found in the cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm. The nuclear DNA, which is found in the eukaryotic cells, are associated with certain kind of proteins called as histones. And this is not present in prokaryotic DNA because it is present in the cytoplasm. Now, before we talk about why DNA is called the genetic material, let us know what is genetic material. So, genetic material the material which carries all the information of the formation of different body parts, different characters of the body, and subsequently it is transferred to the next generation is called as genetic material. It transfers all the information from an individual to the coming generation. Now let us know the important features of genetic material. First is, it is found in all the living cells, in all living cells. Second is, it transfers information and formation of all the characters and formation of all the characters of an individual. Characters of an individual. To the next generation, It also helps in the expression of the characters. Next is, the amount of genetic material is fixed. Amount of genetic material is fixed. The most important is, it replicates, that is, it makes its own copies. So, the genetic material should have the ability to replicate. It replicates, that is, it makes its own copy. The substance that we consider as genetic material should have the ability to mutate, undergo mutation and recombination. So, important is, it should undergo mutation and recombination, so that variation is formed, a genetic variation is formed. To form genetic variation. So this is very important. If DNA is a genetic material, it should have the ability to recombine and undergo mutation, so that a genetic variation, which always leads to evolution, is formed. Now we know what is a genetic material and what are the characteristics, what are the important features of a genetic material. Now the question arises that why DNA is considered as a genetic material. DNA is considered as a genetic material because of its following properties. Let us know about the properties. First is, it is present in all the living cells. In almost all the living cells. Second is, the amount of DNA is fixed in all the somatic cells of an individual. So, the amount of DNA is fixed in all the somatic cells of an individual. The next important point is, DNA is a stable molecule. DNA is a stable molecule. DNA can replicate itself and it also can undergo mutation so that variation takes place. So, we can write that DNA can replicate. That is, it can make its own similar copies. Make its own similar copies. Similar copies. It can also undergo mutation so that evolution takes place. Now next is the amount of DNA. Amount of DNA in the daughter cells is seen after mitosis. And in the gametes, what happens? The amount of DNA is halved. So in the gametes, the amount of DNA is halved after meiosis. So we have seen that the amount of DNA in the daughter cells is seen after mitosis. But in the gametes, the amount of DNA is half of the parental cells. Okay. Now, we have already learned that mitochondria and the plastids, they are autonomous in functioning. It is only because they have got their own DNA, which is an extranuclear DNA. So all these characters suggest that DNA is the only genetic material because its important property is it has the ability to replicate, it has the ability to mutate, and recombination is also present. Here I would also like to mention that DNA is very sensitive to the environmental changes. So all these characters that today we have learned, they ascertain that DNA is the only genetic material.